Last candle, I got no more. I don't know where I'll find one this far out. I came out here during the last phase of the project. That was, 24 years ago? And the work got intense, as you can imagine, so toward the end I left the compound in the car, and for 3 nights I got out here somewhere. Just a camp where no one could find me, settle my mind, cohere my thoughts. They've been racing for weeks. I had a dog back then. Londoner. Just him and me camping out here. There was nothing in all directions. I've always wanted to tell someone this. On the first night, Londoner and I went walking. Walking way out into the desert. Stars everywhere, deep red sky, mountains far away. Came across a water source, a little lake. Shallow, perfectly smooth, more like a pool. We were standing there and Londoner started barking. There was a speck of bright light on the surface of the water, and it spread and it expanded, glowing, the glow of a fire, but there wasn't one. And then I looked up toward the hills, and I did see one, far away. It looked like a campfire, but it started to move. It started to sort of snake down a hill, like an S pattern. When it moved, the glow in the lake moved with it. But that wasn't possible because the two were so far separated, a mile, maybe. I tried to calm Londoner, but he started bucking and trying to go back the way we came. The fire went out all at once, but the glow on the water kept spreading, and then it vanished too, like a switch been turned off. No more light, no more barking, no more anything. The next morning in daylight, there was nothing unusual about that lake, nothing at all. The second night I woke up in my tent because Londoner was barking again. He was at my feet. And I saw the glow from right outside us, outside the tent. It spread out on the ground from nothing, this yellow glow. And I felt heat. I heard a low, whispery rumble like from a very small fire. I unzipped the tent flap real fast and stuck my head out, and the glow disappeared around the side of the tent. I got out. I was convinced someone had a torch or something. It was a fire glow with no fire, no smoke. And then suddenly, kind of like before, it was just dark all around. No glow, no heat, no source. Londoner barked and barked, and I called out, but no one answered. So now I was thinking, who is coming for me? Who wants me harmed? It ended on the third night, about 11. There was no act of hiding this time. There was no misdirection. Londoner and I were walking again because I wanted to see everything out here. And I was hoping the phenomenon would come back. I really did hope that. I wanted to know. There was a place of giant rocks, tall, spread out. We were walking and we stepped around one, and on the side of the next rock up ahead, that glow of a fire. I reached out to touch it. It was hot. I heard that rumble. We stepped out into the open, and there it was, in front of us. Londoner didn't make a sound. He froze in place this time. At first, it looked like a man on fire. Large man, entirely engulfed, standing on 2 thick legs. So hot and bright, I felt my face bronzing. It even moved its arms. But then I saw they weren't precisely arms because those long protrusions retracted, and two others grew in a different spot in its mass. It happened again and again, like a starfish losing and gaining limbs. All fire but no smoke. And inside the mass, these two murkier patches of dark red, like big oval eyes, but they were moving and changing in size and traveling the length and width of its body. It was inching forward. I felt Londoner beside me bolt and run. Good for him. Something was happening to my mind because I couldn't bring myself to move. Maybe it was the visual cortex's primal fascination with fire. The skin on my face actually began to blister. I felt how agonizingly painful that was, but I just stood there. Those wet, moving eyes were impossible to look away from. Then the wind rose up. I saw the flames bend with it. I felt myself reaching out with my right hand. I got so close. It hurt so much. And then it was gone. I mean, it snapped out of existence. It was dark, and I was alone and in pain, and there was no trace of the fire thing. I staggered off to find Londoner. I got so lost. And finally he came to me. He was whimpering, and I remember hugging him tight, and then we had to find our way back to camp, but we stayed lost. Just a wide plain in every direction. I became pretty terrified for us both. I think it was probably past 1 when we came across the settlement. It was kind of a shanty town out here in the desert. Shacks, some old campers. Must have been 3 acres of them. People living out beyond society. I heard talking, and in one of the shacks there was a hand-built bar and mismatched tables. The saddest place you've ever seen, but there were probably 12 people inside, drinking, laughing. Outcasts, vagabonds, desert people, free. And I drank with them. In desperation to feel normal again. Some woman put some kind of salve she mixed on my burns, and people reached out to pet Londoner, and there was gin and whiskey and singing, and God, did I drink. And I got drunk enough to tell them what I saw. And they got quiet. This one guy looked at me close and he said, "What is it that you do?" I couldn't really tell him. I'd signed an NDA before I came out west. Hell, I wrote the NDA. I told him I was a surveyor. Then this hand closed over my wrist. I turned, and an old man was sitting down next to me. He told me he'd never met anyone who'd seen what I'd seen. So interesting, the legends that even in America, we think we know this place, but there are people out there living in the far spaces who talk about things their grandparents talked about, and their grandparents, and their great-grandparents, and on and on. Who knows where it all comes from? Out of the spider cracks of history. The old man didn't talk so capably. He had no education, but I got the essence. He said this thing came only to those who meant to create something more powerful than humans were ever meant to create. Something that must never be, but because we are suicidally greedy for knowledge, does become real. And from that moment on, history changes, and darkness feeds. It feeds on what our knowledge has borne. He said to me, "You have to stop. You have to stop." They were not so friendly then, those people. I told them, "Look, I'm just a surveyor. and I took Londoner, and a woman on horseback guided us back to our camp. She never spoke, never said a word, just made us follow her on foot. And eventually there was the shallow lake again, and she turned and went away. My burns healed up eventually. When I left the desert for good that October, I felt this compulsion to drive around it for hours, trying to find where exactly it was that I'd camped that night. I'd done a lot of reading since then, and wouldn't you know, there it was, mentioned in Hiram Maxim's diaries, 1884. 2 mentions, actually. It came to him when he went on a cycling trip through Austria, just after he finished his designs for the first automatic weapon. Not many people know his name today. Hiram Maxim. Yes, indeed. You have to figure our old buddy Oppenheimer got a visit at some point. Los Alamos is only about 400 miles away from here, as the crow flies. Surely Oppenheimer saw it, but if he did, he never wrote it down. Maybe he told his wife and kids. Who knows? Maybe Johannes Gutenberg got a glimpse, for all we know. Anyway, when it got to sunset and I'd driven 100 completely pointless miles in a big, confusing circle, I decided me and Londoner would start heading out of there. Didn't want to get caught in full dark. And at that moment, there was a glow in the distance. A fire, a tremendous fire. We went toward the glow, and that shanty town where I'd been that night, the March before, was right there. It was on fire, all of it, every part of it, every shack, every car. People were running, screaming. Smoke was swirling. It was an inferno. There was no saving the people who couldn't get out. I grabbed a hand at some point. I reached into some kind of exploding red pit of dark and grabbed a hand reaching out to me. But it was too hot to hold, and I let it go. Not all of them died. A lot of them did. The old man did. I found that out. They didn't know what caused it. People like that, living outside the bounds, no one's going to really investigate. But I know, I think. It was no coincidence my coming across that burning at that moment. I think it wanted to show me one more time what was at stake. I've never apologized for keeping the project going. I am a scientist, and I was a scientist then. And I wasn't the only one who kept pushing and redefining. The mechanoids have my name, but I wasn't the only one. We were trying to help the world. I was trying to reshape the world. God, why did I give them my name? Anyway, I miss Londoner. He passed on 20 years before whatever you call this war. The nights do get lonely now, don't they? They get lonely.